After 30 years of marriage, he finally stopped keeping score, and it changed everything. If you're tired of feeling like you're doing more than your fair share in your marriage, this episode will transform how you see generosity in relationships. Welcome to Bringing Hope Home. We're Bryce and Colette Schaffer, and we're on a mission to bring God's hope, healing, and practical strategies right into your living room. Whether you're navigating marriage challenges, parenting struggles, or just looking to build a stronger family foundation, we've got your back. Hey, welcome to Bringing Hope Home. We are Bryce and Colette in for another great episode in the series of Fruit of the Spirit. I couldn't remember.
Maybe you'll edit this one a little bit right there. But yeah, the fruit of the Spirit, and we are on goodness this month. We were just done with kindness in the month of June, and now the month of July is all on goodness. And it really is. It's the goodness of God. If you've ever heard the song by Bethel, Goodness of God, is one of my all-time favorites. There's a lady that sings that one, and I just get into the presence of God. And that's really where we want to come out of in our podcast for the next month, is the goodness of God as the fruit of the Spirit. It's tapped into or placed on the inside of you, and you get to tap into that. And then your lifestyle changes to be the goodness of God. It really does. And what does that look like? It does look like kindness. Kindness and goodness are kind of synonymous with each other. They're twins when it comes to things. But, just like kindness has an objective heart, care, concern, and value to somebody, goodness has another kind of concern, and it's more of a generosity kind of
more of a tangible.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what we got to look at here this month. And, I also look at it as, the definition of good is subjective. It really is. I mean, because what I consider good, dribbling skills in basketball, if a freshman comes into our program, that might be good, but is it good enough for a varsity level? And so forth. Is it good enough for the college level? And so it's very subjective in what people like, what they call good. And so we want to look at how God sees things a little bit today. Obviously, that's always our bend on things. And in goodness, one of the things people do, and I have been very guilty of it in the beginning of my marriage and in life, is I like to keep score. There's my wife and her little smirk, if you are just listening to this podcast. And, I get it because my mom always wanted it to be fair between my brother and I, because it was always a competition. Everything is a competition in life. However, that kind of stinking thinking has to go out the door when it comes to marriages.
Yeah. And I think if you have that kind of mindset in a marriage where it's equal, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to get frustrated pretty quick.
Yeah, and bitter. Oh, my goodness.
Because usually marriage is not what you would quote unquote equal.
Yeah, or even in a job, we think of equal. You got to pull your weight.
Right. Most good marriages, if we're going to use the word good marriages, and you look at it, the natural, what the world would say as equal, it's not there.
Right.
Because we each have our gifts.
That's right.
We each have our things that we offer. And so, we're not going to be the same. We're not going to offer the same. And, that would be kind of...
Did you hear that? We're not going to offer the same in the marriage.
Yeah.
So we're going to end up being heavily used in one area and lightly used in another as a couple.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay. Yes, have to be okay with it. And marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100% of who you are. And it's out of the goodness, out of your heart of love and compassion and linking arms with each other
Mm-hmm.
that you take on life and take on the challenges of your home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key. And so you are there with the fruit of the Spirit of goodness is just to sow and sow and sow and sow. And I know that seems illogical.
Mm-hmm.
It does, because again, if you're like me and you're a scorekeeper, it's going to get lopsided real quick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about that. And if
Being generous.
usually, I'll tell on myself, usually when I decide to have a pity party and bring my score book out to share with you, usually there's scores that you keep or don't keep, but you bring up because you can remember that I'm lacking in as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking this to you all out there in our podcast land and just saying, don't do what I have done in the past, but know that,
After 30 years, you've
after
gotten some
30
wisdom.
years, I've slowed down the scorekeeping book. It's still there, but it's not important. And in a marriage, it can't be important. Marriage sometimes does feel one-sided. It does feel like you are carrying the load.
Mm-hmm.
But is it really so? And here's the key to all this. And you might have a lazy spouse. Then you need to talk. You need to say, we're not meshing together to complete this family.
Yeah, or not saying one person is supposed to do all the work and the other.
No, if it's a lazy
doesn't.
person, then you and the other person needs to sit down and talk about that, the load management.
Mm-hmm.
But in being generous in a marriage, you are bringing your all and bringing your expertise and loving on your wife or your husband and your kids and the situations that you find yourselves in. And when you do that, that's out of a generous heart. That's out of the goodness of your heart,
Mm-hmm.
not out of kindness. Kindness is for others. Kindness is when we're affecting our communities. The goodness of our, and we can be goodness out too.
Yeah, again, it's interchangeable.
Again, they're interchangeable, but a goodness, in this case, I really think as a family person, and especially as the husband, I'm giving out of the goodness, the well of who I am into this marriage, into this family, that it runs correctly and smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to do that. The Bible says in Acts 20:35, it is more blessed to give than receive. And our mindset, our flesh thinks opposite.
Yeah, we tend to think selfishly and what am I getting? But if we switch that and what am I giving? We might realize that, we're lacking in the department of giving. If we look at, ourselves, but it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Right. And I think there is your generosity can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Can become contagious is the word.
So yeah, and we have another verse here, Luke 6:38 says, "Give and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together." So the kingdom of God operates in giving. If we tap into being generous and giving, we tap into the goodness of God, because that's what he does. He gives.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to switch our thinking to being selfish. What am I getting? To what am I giving?
And God has a plan for you as a couple and as a family. So that's the way it shouldn't be. How do I get and receive and meet my needs? It's how am I meeting the needs of this family? How can I help support everybody else? And when the other person has that same mindset, it runs really smoothly. Again, we're not talking about someone that just wants to live off of you, be and just abuse this situation. Yeah, be a leech, but abuse that situation. We're talking about someone that really ultimately cares about each other, and we're pulling on the same direction and doing the same things, but it will look different. It's going to look different because we're different people and we have different skill sets. And so that again, it comes out of the goodness and the generosity from God, from us into the family. And so, we have some, questions that, a lot of people say to us over the years, and maybe I've used one or two, and we won't say because I've already, gotten myself into trouble or told you about my troubles.
Yeah.
But the first one, but here's something someone might say, but what if I'm already doing more than my share? And, the answer, that's a good question. And that's a valid
And that
feeling.
really just depends on the situation too. And there are seasons of life, right? So especially when you have young kids, that's a season that, mom might be doing more work with the kids, so dad needs to pick up the slack around the house or whatever, however it looks in your life. So it just depends on season. Jobs. If you are out of town a lot, then the other person that's home is going to pick up a lot of the slack.
Yeah.
And
so that comes down to communication. When you feel like that you're doing more than your fair share, then it's communication. Don't let it ride into bitterness or anxiety or where you can't feel like you can say anything because then you're going to explode. Don't get to those moments. Talk them through, but also understand the seasons of life that you're in for sure. Number two is, won't this enable my spouse to be lazy? And we've kind of talked about lazy. Laziness is the four-letter word you don't want out of yourself or anybody in your family. But, will it enable somebody else? And the answer is this kind of generosity doesn't. God, just look at you and God. And I don't expect God, if I'm lazy toward God, I just want God to give me everything and supply all my needs, right? And I do nothing with it or nothing for it. And God doesn't operate that way in our life. We don't need to operate that way in our families. And again, when laziness creeps in, that's the time to communicate for sure, and emphasize your own goodness and say, you know what, God, where can you show me that I need to pick up the slack for sure? So
yeah, we have a challenge that I put out last month, the kindness challenge for couples. And so, although it's kindness, it still goes along with this being generous to each other in marriage. So I'm going to put that down. It's a free challenge. It has 31 ideas. I think it was like 2 a day of ideas and things to do with your spouse.
That would
so
be good.
A good place to start, if you're like, well, this sounds really foreign, I don't even know where to start.
Start there for sure. Last one, we can't afford to be generous right now. And my mind immediately goes to money. And, can't be generous. Well, it could be your time. I can't be generous in my time. I'm super busy. I'm overloaded with whatever, the stress, the debt, what, you name it, the devil's going to try to wiggle in there and make sure you stop being generous and good. And really you have to realize that the devil wants to come in and whisper to you, and you agree with it, that you can't be generous. You can't be good in any situation. And that's a lie. And so you need to change your attitude about it. What can I be generous about right now? End of story. What can I do? What can I give in my generous out of the goodness that God's given me? And we could sit here and have a whole podcast on just the things that God's been generous and giving and goodness in our lives. Just waking up every morning is a blessing. So, you have to change your attitude and perspective on those kind of things. And in that situation, I can't be. Well, can't is another four-letter word like lazy that shouldn't be in our vocabulary as a family or as a Christian. And so, that's a good place to start, I think.
Yep. And again, we want to give that resource to you totally free. So
Yes.
look at that link and take us up on that. It'd be a good thing to have.
And just try to, be spontaneous in doing something for each other that the other one's going to like. Because that makes it fun. And again, that sparks more fun and more, creativity, and then your life just gets sweeter and sweeter. And that's what we want for all of us, and especially you listening today.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and tell somebody about this podcast. Share. That helps others find us, and it helps us out too. So we would appreciate it. And until next time, bring hope home to your life today.
If you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, give us a 5-star rating and drop a review. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. See you next week.